instead of having, which is really what we had about 4 years ago, had 28 shadow CIO organizations. Every bureau at the State Department had their own IT shop. They were doing their own system administration. We had standardized on an email platform across the board, but they were doing all their own things, all their own stuff in their own bureaus, supporting a group of users out there. We had some boutique operations out there. We had one bureau which had 75 people in it, and they had 2 to 3 systems people. If someone sneezed, they could have an IT person right there on the spot, nothing flat. But is this really the effective way of spending the limited funding that we have? So the first step that we started about 4 years ago was desktop consolidation, providing that utility IT across the board. We did a count at one point. We counted up about 50 different help desks. All these bureaus had their own help desk, and then there were a number of other application help desks out there. Managing 50 separate help desks, it just was not efficient at all. So that was one of the things we wanted to take on with IT consolidation. And we've picked up 25,000 desktops that we manage domestically, and it's from the desktop to the wall plate that we're managing under this program. And as well, we've picked up the messaging and the mobile computing aspect of this. The second area of consolidation, data center. And we kicked this off probably about 2 years ago. We really didn't. I mean, it wasn't something really intentionally. We said, you know, from a strategic standpoint, this is really the direction we need to go in. This was pure requirement. I ran out of space, I ran out of power, and I ran out of cooling. I had no choice. I had to do this. We had 14 data centers of medium to large size. Most of these were old mainframe computer rooms that had been repurposed. So they weren't set up to handle the blade servers, the high power requirements today. In fact, it was so bad at my main computer room, before the electrician would allow me to bring any new equipment in there, I had to take something else offline. And that just wasn't practical in where we were going. So we kicked off a data center consolidation. We're going from 12 major data centers domestically, and we're going to bring it down to 3. We've got one major one on the East Coast. We just opened a year ago, just had the 1-year anniversary of that. That's out of Culpeper. It's in a commercial facility that we're sharing with other parts of the federal government, other commercial entities out there. We're extremely pleased with the way that's going. And we just broke ground. I was out in Denver, Colorado a couple of weeks ago, and we broke ground on our Western data center as well. That'll be on a federal complex just outside of Denver, and it'll be a U.S. government-owned building out there. And we're doing a pod type of construction on that. We're just kicking off our first pod. We'll look at the demand, and as we go through, we're probably projecting in maybe 2015, we would have built out through 2 pods and probably about 6 to 8,000 servers in that facility out there is what we're shooting for. Finally, the last area of consolidation that we're working on, this is one we're really kind of getting into in a big way now, and it's more focused in our overseas environment, is in our networks. Overseas, at a U.S. Embassy environment or consular environment, it's not just State Department. You'll find that we have upwards of 45 different bureaus and agencies represented out there. Department of Homeland Security, Border Control, which is part of DHS. We've got Foreign Commercial Service. We have the United States Agency for International Development. We've got Foreign Agricultural Service, CDC, Center for Disease Control. Consumer Product Safety Commission is now moving overseas. Library of Congress. We've got all these agencies that are out overseas in these missions. And guess what they do? They bring in their own infrastructure. They're all running their own shadow types of organizations at these embassies overseas. Again, all these people report up to, if they're in the embassy, they all report up to the ambassador. They're all under Chief of Mission Authority out there. So you can imagine from a collaboration standpoint, from a communication standpoint, this causes a little bit of a challenge for post overseas. Typically send in an email from another agency, goes from that other agency desk, back to the headquarters agency, across town to State Department, and back out to the embassy again. And collaboration and sharing information really is a huge challenge out there. So we've kicked off, Foreign Agricultural Service has come under, we're calling this the Foreign Affairs Network. It is intended for foreign affairs agencies out there. And this really grew up out of my being overseas and seeing how some of the operations work and how disjointed this is. Everything's connected to the internet today. So typically, again, in my comm center overseas, we may have 13 or 14 different ISPs represented there. There's no economy in doing that. And where we're moving toward is to get a couple of different ISPs on a competitive basis overseas and then bring all of those customers in and share that bandwidth. And then I get a lot of value in doing the bulk. And this kind of leads us into kind of a cloud type of environment, a government cloud type of environment, a quasi private cloud type of environment. But that's really where I see that we're going now with some of this, is getting the data. Again, we're doing the work of diplomacy overseas. We're promoting U.S. trade, U.S. interest, freedom, good democracy. And so by setting up these types of operations overseas, I think it's going to make the U.S. government much more efficient in the long run. But security is a huge issue for us. At the State Department, we are under constant attack. And I was there managing the messaging systems when we first put in our first firewalls. I could sit back and watch the attacks all day. They go all the way down from one port all the way up to the last port, and they're constantly checking all those doors. They're looking for some type of acknowledgement to come in. Well, we've kind of gotten beyond that now. We've got good firewall infrastructure out there. But we do have sensitive information out there, just like any business has sensitive information, proprietary type of information. So what we want to make sure is that we enclave that off, we protect that, and then create the other areas so they can be more of a public sandbox type of area so that people can get to those types of things. Our public diplomacy people, our public affairs people, the USAID who are working with the NGOs, they can get access and get into where they want to go.